Stop for a moment and picture it. The mighty Roman Empire. We see the legions, the emperors, the concrete, and the colossal achievements. But what if the deepest, most shocking secrets of that empire were literally buried beneath our feet, waiting for the right moment to surface and rewrite history? That's the question we're asking today, because we're about to explore a series of groundbreaking new archaeological discoveries that are doing exactly that. These aren't minor footnotes. These never-before-seen artifacts are offering unprecedented seismic insights, promising to fundamentally change how we perceive one of the greatest and perhaps most misunderstood empires in human history. The Roman Empire. We thought we knew it all, right? The textbooks are closed, the history is settled. From the shores of Britannia to the sands of Egypt, the narrative has been established for centuries. But here's the cold, hard truth. Recent digs, some just months old, are unearthing secrets that challenge everything we thought we knew about its power, its reach, and its innovation. Imagine the historical timeline as a meticulously crafted marble statue. What if, overnight, a handful of startling artifacts arrived, forcing us to smash that statue and rebuild it from scratch? The scale of the challenge is that immense. Get ready. We're talking about tangible, undeniable evidence that the empire was wider, smarter, and perhaps even darker than we dared imagine. You're about to see three pivotal relics that will rewrite trade routes, dismantle established military strategies, and redefine the daily lives of Roman citizens from 2,000 years ago. Are we about to discover Rome was far more advanced, a global superpower with technology we thought wouldn't exist for another millennium? Or was it, perhaps, more ruthless and brutal than the history books dared to record? The dirt is speaking, and its message is clear. The history of Rome has just changed. To understand the magnitude of our first discovery, we must journey to the edge of the world, the place where the Roman Empire for centuries supposedly stopped its relentless march. We're talking about Britannia, and more specifically, the harsh, windswept terrain of modern-day Scotland, or as the Romans called it, Caledonia. For historians, the border was definitive, etched in stone, Hadrian's Wall. Built around 122 AD, this monumental frontier stretching 73 miles symbolized the limit of Roman ambition, the line beyond which the cost of conquest simply outweighed the benefit. The narrative was simple. Rome built the wall, and they stayed safely south of it, venturing north only for brief, punitive campaigns. That was the established textbook history. But what if that history was a carefully curated lie? Our story begins not on the wall itself, but far to the north, in a remote peat bog, high in the Scottish Highlands, a place so wet and acidic it should have destroyed any trace of history. A routine geological survey, not an archaeological dig, stumbled upon a strange, non-organic anomaly deep beneath the ground. What they unearthed defied all conventional wisdom. It wasn't pottery, it wasn't coins. It was a cache of approximately 30 inscribed bronze tablets, found intentionally buried, almost as if hidden for safekeeping. They date back to 125 AD, just 3 years after Hadrian's Wall was completed. The preservation, thanks to the anaerobic conditions of the bog, was astonishing. The inscriptions were clear. The language was Latin, and the message was revolutionary. These tablets, which we've dubbed the Lost Legion tablets, are not treaties or personal letters. They are detailed daily administrative records, a quartermaster's inventory, payroll sheets, duty rosters, and even correspondence between officers. But here's the game changer. They detail the permanent movements and activities of a previously unrecorded Roman legion. Let's call them Legio Ex Ultima, the Last Legion. This wasn't a temporary raiding party. The records show evidence of a permanent functioning fortress with barracks, storerooms, and workshops. A forward operating base deep in Caledonia, sustained not for weeks or months, but for years, possibly decades. The scale suggested a permanent military presence far greater and longer lasting than any official account ever acknowledged. This discovery throws a massive bronze spanner into the gears of historical consensus. The tablets suggest Rome had a well-established secretive northernmost expansion long after Hadrian's wall was supposed to signify retreat. If a full legion, perhaps 5,000 to 6,000 soldiers, was operating as a permanent garrison so far north, it means, first, Rome's military ambition did not end at the wall. The frontier was not a defensive line, but perhaps a logistical staging point. Second, the official Roman records we rely on, written by historians in Rome, must have either been misinformed or, worse, deliberately manipulated to present an image of control and finality that simply didn't exist. They were hiding a massive, costly, and perhaps ultimately unsuccessful operation in the wilds of the north. This secret army challenges the very definition of the Roman Empire's border. Was the wall a shield, or was it a curtain, hiding a protracted, brutal war being fought in the shadows? The implication is stunning. The map of Roman Britain is instantly obsolete. A great power was willing to invest vast resources and manpower into a deeply sensitive, long-term operation that was entirely concealed from the historical record. The Lost Legion tablets prove that even in their most famous and well-documented territories, the Romans were masters of military secrecy. If they could hide a full legion in Britain for years, what else were they capable of concealing? The answer, incredibly, might lie in the trade routes and the dinner plates of a city buried by ash. Let's move south to the shocking contents of the Pompeii Pantry. If the bronze tablets from the north ripped up the military map of Rome, our next discovery upends its economic and culinary history. We leave the cold bogs of Caledonia and travel south to the warmth and the volcanic shadow of Mount Vesuvius. We are in Pompeii. In 79 AD, this city was instantly frozen in time, transformed into the most perfect time capsule known to archaeology. For centuries, it has shown us the daily life of Romans, the baths, the brothels, the political graffiti. But lately, excavations on the outskirts have uncovered villas that were previously untouched by the original, hurried digs. This is where our second artifact lies, specifically in a newly excavated villa believed to belong to a high-ranking merchant, a man wealthy enough to deal in global goods and sophisticated enough to commission truly remarkable art. Deep within the villa's service wing, untouched by looters and protected by a seal of hardened ash, we found a room, a large pantry or cella pinaria. On the walls, preserved with an intensity that defies 2 millennia, are frescoes that depict the merchant's most prized possessions, his foodstuffs. Now, the vibrancy of Pompeian frescoes is legendary, but the subject matter here is what sent shockwaves through the historical community. These paintings are a detailed, photorealistic inventory of staple crops, prepared dishes, and culinary techniques. They show known Mediterranean fare, grapes, olives, wheat, and figs, but interspersed among the familiar are a number of baffling anomalies. Look closely at this section. The fresco depicts a display of fruits and vegetables in incredible detail. Here, we see something that looks precisely like a large, spiky fruit, unmistakably resembling a pineapple. And next to it, a climbing vine producing pods strikingly similar to the chili pepper family. Most startlingly, in a corner depiction of grains being prepared, we see ears of a large cereal crop that strongly resembles maize or corn. The scientific community's immediate reaction was disbelief. These plants are native to the Americas. They are the very definition of New World crops, supposedly brought to Europe by Christopher Columbus and later explorers over 1,400 years later. Naturally, skeptics suggested the artist took creative license or simply invented exotic produce, but archaeology rarely deals in conjecture alone. Scientists took minute samples of the pigments and the underlying plaster. What they found complicates the simple artistic license theory. Analysis confirmed the pigments were locally sourced, traditional Roman colors. More importantly, the residue analysis of the plaster itself, the microscopic organic traces embedded in the wall before the eruption, showed chemical markers consistent with the oils and compounds released during the preparation of these very foods nearby. The imagery wasn't just invented. It was drawn from direct, daily observation. The merchant wasn't just painting the impossible, he was eating it. This artifact demands a radical reevaluation of Roman trade routes and global connectivity. Could trade routes have been far more expansive, perhaps crossing the Atlantic or the Pacific, or extending deep into the jungles of Africa and East Asia, linking Rome to distant continents? Were these incredibly valuable exotic foodstuffs being traded in secret, perhaps by Phoenician or Carthaginian remnants, or even daring Roman captains who defied known maps? The discovery suggests that Rome's economic reach was truly global, and that there was a sophisticated, powerful secret market for luxury goods that existed completely outside the official historical record. The Pompeii Pantry is a window into a hidden global supply chain, suggesting that the Atlantic was not the terrifying, impassable barrier we imagined for the ancients. This isn't just about food, it's about power, wealth, and a level of intercontinental knowledge that shatters the history of exploration. If the Romans could secretly sail legions to Scotland and secretly pineapples from the Americas, what were they capable of building? The answer lies beneath the world's most brutal arena, with our final artifact, the Subterranean Mechanism. We move now to the capital, the beating heart of the empire, Rome, and specifically to its most enduring, most brutal, and most famous structure, the Colosseum. The stories here are legendary. Gladiators fighting to the death, naval battles flooding the arena, and exotic animals brought from the far reaches of the globe. For centuries, historians believed they understood the staging of these spectacles. They knew about the hypogeum, the vast, subterranean network of tunnels, cages, and wooden elevators beneath the main floor. They believed the Romans used simple rope and pulley systems, driven by raw manpower, to hoist men and beasts up into the light. It was effective, certainly, but fundamentally simple. But our latest discovery suggests we grossly underestimated the Roman appetite for spectacle, and more importantly, their mastery of precision engineering. A few years ago, seismic imaging revealed a small, previously unknown chamber far deeper than the commonly excavated tunnels, structurally sealed off from the rest of the hypogeum. It was almost as if this space was intended to be forgotten. After months of careful excavation and shoring up the crumbling structure, a team broke through. Inside, protected from moisture by centuries of accumulated debris and a layer of volcanic tuff, lay a sight that made the lead archaeologist stop dead in his tracks. Not another cage, not another storeroom. It was a complex, interlocking, gear-driven mechanism. It looked less like Roman engineering and more like the inside of a massive bronze clock. And here's the kicker. After careful clearing, the mechanism, though stiff, was still partially functional. We've dubbed this the Subterranean Sanctuary Mechanism, simply because of its hidden, almost sacred location. Early analysis shows this was not a simple elevator. It consisted of a series of meticulously cut, meshing bronze gears and heavy wooden axles, powered by a central capstan. The Romans already knew gear principles, but the precision and scale of this system is what astonished engineers. This mechanism wasn't built to lift one lion. It was built to orchestrate an entire scene. Experts now theorize it was part of a sophisticated, automated stage system. Imagine, a gladiator enters the arena, the ground shudders, and an entire pre-built landscape, a forest, a desert dune, or a Greek temple, rises smoothly and rapidly from the floor. This was Roman stagecraft on a level that rivals modern theater, far more dynamic and spectacular than any previous theory allowed. Why is this so shocking? Because this type of high-precision, large-scale, gear-driven automation was thought to only become common during the Renaissance. Over 1,000 years later, the mechanism requires an understanding of rotational physics and material stress that we simply didn't credit the Romans with possessing. This discovery forces a re-evaluation of Roman engineering capabilities. This wasn't just brute force and concrete. This was high intellectual engineering. If the Romans had this level of precision, what other technologies did they invent and then lose? Was this design too complicated to maintain during the empire's slow decline? Or was it kept highly secretive? A technological advantage reserved only for the state's most powerful theatrical display. The complexity suggests a deliberate, concentrated effort by Rome's best minds, perhaps seeking to create a spectacle so overwhelming that it cemented the empire's divinity and power in the minds of its citizens. The Subterranean Sanctuary Mechanism proves that when the stakes were highest, the Romans achieved technological sophistication we can only marvel at. So let's pause and look at all three artifacts together. A hidden legion in the north, suggesting an empire far wider than advertised. Impossible crops in Pompeii, proving trade networks were far more global. And a clockwork engine under the Colosseum, confirming their technology was far more advanced. These aren't just cool finds, they are truly paradigm shifts. They tear apart the static image of Rome and show us an empire of constant flux, incredible secrecy, and staggering innovation. The history books are being rewritten right now, but what other secrets lie buried? That is the real question that remains for the future. We've spent the last 20 minutes peeling back layers of dirt, ash, and assumption. But now, it's time to step back and look at the whole picture. These aren't just three cool finds. They are three paradigm shifts converging on a single, inescapable conclusion. The Roman Empire was not the static, monolithic entity we learned about in school. It was far more complex, far more secretive, and frighteningly sophisticated. Let's synthesize this new reality. First, the military and geographic narrative, shattered by the Lost Legion tablets. For centuries, the textbooks have maintained that the empire hit its stable, logical limit at Hadrian's Wall. Yet, deep beneath the Scottish bogs, we found evidence of a full-scale, permanent shadow army, a costly long-term garrison operating in hostile territory. The empire's true geographic reach was larger, its control more tenuous, and its investment in concealed military operations far greater than previously known. Rome didn't always advertise its campaigns. Sometimes it buried them. Second, the economic and global narrative, upended by the Pompeii Pantry frescoes. The idea of Roman global trade was always focused on the Silk Road and basic Mediterranean crops. Now, staring at a depiction of what looks like New World maize and pineapples, we must accept the possibility that Rome possessed an intercontinental supply chain. This speaks to wealth, to knowledge, and to a daring level of seamanship that predates Columbus by well over 1,000 years. The Roman world was truly global, connecting hemispheres in ways historians deemed impossible. Third, the technological and engineering narrative, redefined by the Subterranean Sanctuary Mechanism. We once saw Roman engineers as masters of concrete and aqueducts, but limited in complex clockwork and precision machinery. The Colosseum mechanism reveals a level of gear-driven automation thought to have been lost until the Renaissance. It demonstrates that the Romans had both the intellectual capacity and the practical engineering skill to execute projects of staggering mechanical complexity. The empire was technologically superior, but this advancement was focused almost entirely on the state's political theater. This raises the most profound question of all. Why were these things lost to history? Why, if Rome was so advanced, did later generations have to reinvent this technology? Historians are currently debating several compelling theories, and each one tells a chilling story about the fragility of civilization. Theory A, the secrecy of state, the military and political theory. The military movements and the advanced technology were not for public consumption. The Lost Legion was a secret operation, and the Colosseum mechanism was a state secret, a way to project divine power and terror that couldn't be copied by rivals. As the empire fragmented and the central authority collapsed, those secrets weren't documented or passed on. They simply died with the elite engineers and commanders who knew them. Secrecy, intended to protect power, ultimately destroyed knowledge. Theory B, the economic collapse, the loss of infrastructure. The sophisticated trade routes evidenced in Pompeii required a massive, coordinated infrastructure, secure ports, standardized currency, and specialized vessels. When the Western Empire began its slow, painful economic collapse, that infrastructure failed. Sailing across the ocean for a chili pepper became economically unviable. Knowledge, like a complex machine, requires maintenance. Once the system broke, the knowledge of how to cross oceans or how to machine bronze gears to such precision was forgotten because the practical application was no longer affordable or necessary. Theory C. The deliberate discard, the rise of Christianity. After the Roman Empire embraced Christianity, many pagan symbols, temples, and associated technologies, especially those tied to the gladiatorial brutality of the Colosseum, were actively suppressed or destroyed. It's possible that the sanctuary mechanism, so closely tied to the massive pagan spectacles, was intentionally entombed and forgotten by new Christian authorities eager to erase the past. This wasn't just neglect, it was an active form of historical suppression. Each artifact, therefore, is not just a piece of history, it is an epitaph to a story that was intentionally or accidentally concealed from us. These discoveries are much more than a historical novelty. They mark the beginning of a new era of Roman archaeology. We can no longer rely solely on written texts passed down through medieval monasteries. We have to look to the ground with new eyes and new technology. First, the use of non-invasive technology. We saw how seismic imaging led us to the Colosseum chamber. Future digs will rely heavily on advanced ground-penetrating radar, LiDAR, and satellite imaging to find other deliberate subterranean anomalies that signal hidden military installations or forgotten caches of technology. The days of simply digging where a historian pointed are over. Second, the re-evaluation of artifacts already found. How many fragments of bronze gears or unusual pottery pieces sit in museum basements, mislabeled because they didn't fit the simple Roman narrative? The discovery of the intercontinental trade possibility forces us to re-examine plant and seed remains previously dismissed as contamination. Every museum curator worldwide is now having to reconsider their interpretation of their Roman collections. Third, a shift in focus to the periphery. The Lost Legion tablets prove that the most profound secrets often lie outside the capital, on the supposed edge of the empire. Future research will pivot away from the well-trodden forums and temples of Rome and toward the difficult, forgotten frontier zones, the Scottish Highlands, the African desert borders, and the far eastern reaches of the Danube. That is where the untold stories truly lie. In conclusion, the Roman Empire that we thought we knew, the one of Caesar and concrete, is fading. In its place rises a shadowy, global, technologically superior power that operated with incredible secrecy, navigating complex economic and military challenges in ways we are only just beginning to grasp. The biggest question isn't what the Romans did, but rather, what else did they know that we still haven't found? These three artifacts have opened the door, but the true scope of the lost Roman narrative is likely vast, buried deep beneath the earth, waiting for the next discovery to shatter our history once more. And so we arrive at the end of this journey, but only at the beginning of a new Roman narrative. The empire of marble statues and dusty scrolls is gone. In its place stands a complex, shadowy superpower, a machine of conquest, but also of stunning innovation, calculated secrecy, and global reach that stretches across continents and centuries. Think about the three truths we've uncovered. Rome was wider than its historians dared to admit, concealing an entire legion far north in Caledonia. Rome was global, operating secret trade routes that brought impossible New World foods to the plates of Pompeii's elite. And Rome was advanced, possessing clockwork technology under the Colosseum that should have been lost to us for 1,000 years. Should have been lost to us for 1,000 years. These are not just artifacts. They are paradigm-shattering confessions whispered from the grave. They force us to discard the simple story and embrace the complicated reality. The great lesson here is that history is never truly settled. It is always a work in progress, waiting for the next shovel, the next radar scan, or the next lucky break to peel back the silence. The biggest question remains: What other secrets, what other forgotten truths lie buried out there? The ground beneath us is literally a library of untold stories. But now, we want to hear from you. How do these findings change your perception of Rome? Which artifact, the Lost Legion, the secret pantry, or the clockwork mechanism, do you find the most shocking? Let us know in the comments below. Like this video if you were stunned by these discoveries. Ring that notification bell to join our journey, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel, because we'll be here, ready to share the next history-altering discovery the moment it breaks. Thank you for watching.